respect way more than he did earlier in his career. Because in my opinion, Lost Professor was the East Coast Dr. Dre.
He was. A lot of people don't. Thank you. Say that
Like
again for the people in the back. They didn't know that.
he
Yes.
introduced Nas, he introduced Akinelli, he introduced a few
Yes.
people, and got them
Yes.
signed to record companies with his music
Yes. He did.
after Main Source.
Facts. Facts. I
Akinelli was the first Queens
now.
artist signed to Interscope Records.
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
Corona Queens, Corona's finest. Yes.
Come on, like don't
Yes.
get me started, bro. Man,
Yes.
I'm a student of this, like for real.
Yo,
Yes.
peace. I actually had a question for Paul. Like, since we was talking about Nas' influences, what was that studio session like on Destroy and Rebuild? Like, 'cause
Wow.
Rick is one of his biggest influences, obviously. So, did he talk to you before and tell you he was going to take
Absolutely.
the play?
I'm glad you asked that question because not a lot of people ask me that question. So I'm gonna give you a little backstory.
That's what's up.
So I actually, was shopping music. Me and my boy Prestige, formerly a Bad Boy Hitman. He produced records for like Jay-Z, Biggie, Puff, and we both submitted beats. And then I got the call back from the A&R of Sony at the time, Lenny Nicholson, who happened to also be responsible for A. Marie's career, and he ended up marrying her. So Lenny Nicholson contacted me, said, "Yo, there's a record that I got from you that Nas is interested in for his album." At the time, Nas was doing recording in the Bahamas because he needed to get away. That was around the time he was going through the stress of the stuff with him and Jay Z, if y'all remember.
Mm-hmm.
Takeover was already out, so he was in the Bahamas doing some of the recording for the album as a getaway. And then he came back to New York, and we ended up hitting the studio in Times Square, New York, called Right Track Studios. So I show up, a lot of security at the door. I couldn't even get the session without being patted down. Again, there was a lot of stuff going on with him and Jay at the time. You know what I mean? So I'm in the studio session, we vibing, and he said to me, "Yo, what made you think of that beat when he chose my track?" And I didn't answer him. Reason why I didn't answer him is because I kind of knew what inspired me to make the beat, but I didn't want to tell him that. I didn't think he would get it.
Mm.
But the
Damn.
truth is, uh, I was inspired to make that beat because Alchemist had this record he did for CNN, featuring Foxy Brown. We gonna thug this shit out. Remember that joint?
Yeah. Yeah. It was
If you
distant.
listen
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
record, it's
This
like
record.
got
Yeah.
chords. It's like got these
Yo.
cascading chords and the drums bounce. It's like, you know what
Yo.
I'm saying? The way the beat, the bounces, the snares bounce on that track.
Yo.
So for me, the Story Build production wise, I took the approach of marrying the drum movement of that CNN record with the chord progressions of a Dr. Dre.
Oh shit.
I didn't sample anything on that record. So, I programmed the drums and then I played the bass and the guitar and the chords through a rolling keyboard module, and that's how I got the music, you know what I mean,
Shit.
for that track. So I never tonalized that though, because I didn't think he would get the technical shit, so I didn't say nothing when he asked me that. And then,
Shit.
we recorded the record. He's like, uh, it's kind of different. I hope you like it. So I was like, nah, we good, man. And he plays the record because he recorded the vocals in the Bahamas. And
Shit.
then he called me in the studio to finish it, respecting me as a producer to finish the record with him. So he's playing me the record. I'm listening. He's spitting. I'm like, okay, okay. Then I'm hearing him dissing niggas, and I'm like, oh shit, here we go. It's a diss record. You know what I mean? So in my mind, because I want this record to be a single, I wanted to make a hit. I got an ego. I'm a producer, Nas. I wanna smash niggas. But knowing it's a diss record, I'm like, okay, this ain't gonna be no single. It will get the streets talking though. So I'm gonna just
Facts.
make sure I mix the fuck out of this record. So as I'm listening to it, he had an outro where he's really talking like verbatim to everyone, saying some real ill stuff. And I was just like, all right, he's not rhyming at this point. Now he's just talking, like just going
Part of me
on.
always got that part, the Tupac energy when he's talking at the end, like
Right.
he was
So
channeling Tupac.
so it was worse than what you heard. So I came
Oh
in, I
wow.
said,
Whoa.
yo,
Whoa.
why don't you just change the outro where you talking to them, but you're not necessarily being disrespectful. You just speaking your piece like, look, like the
What
song
the?
says, destroying and rebuilding.
That's what's
So
up.
it's
That's
like it's like
crazy.
airing out your grievances in the verses, and at the end you just close out your position on the record. Like, yo, let's get Queensbridge back to where it's supposed to be. That type of shit. And that's when he's talking. He's not talking as reckless. He's talking his shit, but he's closing it out on a positive note. And then he ends and he goes QB.
Yo.
You know what I'm
That's great.
saying? So when I mix the record, I'm letting it play out. I'm letting him talk. Then as soon as he says QB, I stop the drums and I just let the chords play out by
Yes,
itself.
you did. Yup.
Yeah,
Yup.
yeah, that does
QB.
hard.
Yep.
You know what
Oh
I'm saying?
shit.
So that's how I made the record. And then I remember Jungle was in the studio and he's like, yo, when I mixed the record, he's like, yo, I'm taking it straight to the hood of Queensbridge tonight and play this for my niggas, you know?
That taking that to the bridge is wild. Like right after
That
it's
is
done.
wild. Right. That
Yeah,
is wild. Especially when he was
yeah,
who he was dissing, because that was the first time we heard Nas diss Prodigy. We
yeah.
thought
And
that
here's
it
the
was
funny
just
thing.
Cormega. Yeah.
And here's the funny thing. I had a DVD that had came out at the time called Welcome to Death Row. It was a DVD about the story of Death Row and Tupac and all that shit, right? So on our downtime in the session, I played the video. So me and Nas watched the video. He seen it for the first time. We seen it together. Then he's like, uh, "Yo, I don't know why Pac didn't like me." And I didn't
Shit.
have I had nothing to say. I was just listening to him talk. Like, it's like he was a fan of Pac, so he didn't understand why he
Oh,
took issue with him like that because they never had any personal interactions for him to pass judgment, against him, other than, the East Coast West Coast rivalry thing. So
Yeah.
uh, after watching the Death Row, he was talking about how he had once got courted by Interscope Records to possibly sign to Interscope and leave Columbia, but they never got the negotiations done. But I remember he telling me about how he had a dinner with Jimmy Iovine and Ted Fields, and the dinner, he was just like, "What do I say to someone who just made 400 million?" Because they had just re-upped their monies from the success of Dr. Dre's Chronic albums and all that, and Snoop albums and all of that, and they wanted to court him to buy him out of his contract for Columbia to
What
Interscope,
the fuck?
that's crazy.
That is
and
This
but
crazy.
it
is
never happened.
right here for real.
Listen, man, when you talk to me, you're not gonna just get history of the music. You're gonna get some real hip hop stories. This is my life.
We appreciate that,
For real.
and that and I just want to give props to the song itself because I don't think it gives enough credit, and I appreciate you explaining your mental process as far as like the chord progression and the drums and everything because I always thought that was a top tier song because Nas is floating on there with the Slick Rick influence,
Yes.
the Rick style and
Yeah,
his
and if you peep the cover, it was inspired by Slick Rick. It's
right,
Yep.
super
right. That
subliminal.
too. But he's
Yeah.
Super.
spitting venomous stuff, but he's saying it in a laid back manner in a storytelling format like Rick
Yeah.
used to. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
If you
And
notice, he borrowed the cover stillmatic from the cover of Great Adventures of Slick
The
Rick.
Great Adventures,
right,
He's
Slick Rick.
standing
right.
Yep.
with a
Like, what
background in a
does that?
city. He's standing with a background in a city like sideways with the jewelry on,
Yep.
but instead of a suit like Slick Rick was with the Bally's on, Nas is in a sweatsuit, you know what I mean, with his jewelry on. Like the whole cover art was inspired by Slick Rick. So I really understood what he was doing when he did that because he borrowed Slick Rick in terms of cadence and tone and delivery, but then he's also being playing against KRS One, saying the bridge is over in the chorus.
Yep. You're
Now,
right.
mind
You,
you, I didn't sample nothing on that record, but KRS One got 33 to 30% of the publishing rights on that song because Nas said
The
He
that
said it
interpolation,
hook.
right.
the
Yeah.
interpolation of yeah. But
So
that's
so that was
dope.
my paying it forward to Karis One. He owes me a thank you because I helped him get a check off of Stillmatic to this day.
Word, word. Yeah, that. Thank you for that story. That was dope. I actually have another